Hello, world. You're listening to Eleanor Wagner's Strange and Scary World, here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, where we're always creeping it real. I'm your host, Eleanor Wagner.
Today's guest has RN, MSN, pediatric nurse practitioner, public speaker, consultant, and writer beside her name. She even hosts her own podcast. So why have her as a guest on Eleanor's Strange and Scary World? Well, the truth of the matter is she has some haunting hospital tales to tell, and I'm fixing to hear all about them. Let's give a warm welcome to Ersilia Pompilio.
Thank you, Eleanor.
Hi, Ersilia.
Yeah, I so love this topic, the paranormal. Healthcare is a favorite of mine. Dating and food is a favorite of mine, but I love talking about the paranormal. So it's a topic I kind of keep under wraps, but my close friends know what I'm all about. So
Well, as you know, I write about true life ghost stories in my books. I've shared my own personal experiences in my books, and I've gathered stories from others around my county, the country, and the world. I've been very intrigued to hear the stories from many that happen in hospitals or senior care facilities. And you wrote an article specifically on this topic. Is that correct?
That's correct. Back in 2015, I was hosting a storytelling show at the Hollywood Fringe Festival, and I needed some PR. And I went ahead and submitted my show and my story to a nursing journal, nursing magazine. It's called Working Nurse Magazine. And the editor sent me back in a response and said, I don't do this, but hey, can you write me an article on haunted hospitals? And I was like, well, not really. I'm really busy right now. And she's like, I'll pay you. And I had already written an article called Our Little Hospital Ghost. And it was a true ghost story, but I wrote it as fiction. And it was about a little girl ghost who haunts Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. And everybody knows that ghost story. And many people have seen that little girl, and they've even seen her at McDonald's. So I had submitted this to the editor, and so she had a piece of my writing. And I had never really written about paranormal stuff, but I was really into it. I had been studying it for many years. I took a paranormal class from Josefina Lopez. She was a screenwriting teacher of mine, and she wrote Real Women Have Curves. She's a huge lover of the paranormal as well. You know, there's this one very haunted hospital in Los Angeles. It's called the Linda Vista Hospital. It's now an assisted living facility because they tore it down. But for many years, it was abandoned. And it was also used as a set, like ER was filmed there. And it's in Boyle Heights, California, in Los Angeles. So I had done my research about it and found out it was really haunted. A lot of ghost hunters had gone there. A lot of people had gone there to do seances. So an interesting thing happened. I went there on site, and I had never written a journalistic article. So I just wrote it from what I had in my head of what a journalistic writer would write. So I went to the site. And it was a brand new hospital. Like I said, they had just put up this assisted living facility. I was kind of upset because I was like, well, I wanted to see that gore, which we typically think is a haunted place. But it's all new and beautiful. And I walked in, and I'm very empathic and I'm very sensitive to feelings. So that was the first thing I did, was as I walked into one of the more vacant sides of this building, I just started to feel, and immediately I could feel the energy as I walked in. And the hairs on my arms stood up, and it was just very, very interesting. And even though this is a brand new building, I still could see shadows and stuff. So as I was walking around, just looking for evidence, a very young security guard saw me, and he's like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, oh, I'm just looking around. And I told him I was writing this article on haunted hospitals. So I asked him if he knew any stories. So he was brand new. This was his second day on the job. Typical horror story, right? But he tells me that, you know, the other security guards, of course, vetted him and told him all the stories about the Linda Vista Hospital, including one that he told me the security guard had seen. So this place back in, I forget, 1920s or so, I forget the exact years. It was one of the major hospitals in Los Angeles, and the trains ran through there. And it was a hospital set up for the railroads, right? People who worked at the railroad. So this was a hospital for them. And it was a self-contained hospital. Like they had cows there, chickens, all of that stuff, right? But towards like the 1980s, it was a major gang-infested hospital where it was like the homeboy ambulance where people would just bring dead gangbangers and throw them into the emergency room. And that's what they call the homeboy ambulance. This security guard starts telling me, because they used to have a smokestack, like an, what's it called? They had an incinerator in the back where they would cremate the bodies. I forgot, a crematorium. So they had a crematorium in the back. And he told me that there's nothing back in the crematorium now. It's just a vacant, I think they use it as a storage space now. And he told me that one of the security guards still goes there and he could see stacked up bodies. Okay. And he told me that also some of the tenants of the skilled nursing facility can occasionally smell the scent of burning flesh. So I wrote this in my article. And what was really interesting is a friend of mine who grew up in Boyle Heights, who's also a nurse, got back to me after she read that article. And I didn't even send it to her. I think I had posted it on my Instagram or something like that. And she told me, she goes, I remember that smell as a child because when they would burn the bodies, you could smell it around in the neighborhood. And it's a distinct smell of when flesh is being burned. So yeah, it was a really fun article. And we were talking about serendipities before this. So interesting things started happening when I was writing this article is like I went to a bookstore and I happened to tell the girl at the front desk at the bookstore about my article. And she told me her mother used to work at that hospital back in the day, like in the 1980s. So she was telling me a little bit more on how there were underground tunnels connecting different buildings. And that's where a lot of the weird stuff would happen. So that was that article. It's no longer on as a digital. So I think that either my editor is going to republish it for Halloween because she did that with one of my other articles recently, or it's dead, but I do have a hard copy of it.
There is a misconception that people think just because a place is new that it can't be haunted, but they forget that there may have been something on that land prior to the building being there, or a building was taken down and not just the land being haunted. And you can have this whole totally new building there or a renovated building, and it can still be haunted because of the things that were there before or the land that's haunted itself.
Sure, because, there's portals, there's also grids. You believe in parallel realities. I mean, the grids could be affecting the way that the building is being built or sectioned. It could be interfering with a grid that's either leading into a portal or another reality, which is then inviting other things in.
Those tunnels are a perfect way for a portal for ghosts to come in and out from different arenas.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Well, you had mentioned that in your little piece that you had sent to me, that there was an apparition of a woman walking down a narrow corridor. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I totally remember that story. So back in the day, I used to work at White Memorial Hospital, which is in Boyle Heights. Boyle Heights, there's a lot of places there that are very, very haunted. And that is where my paranormal teacher, Josefina Lopez, actually teaches. And she has 3 theaters there, which are Casa 101. That whole area is very haunted, and hospitals in general are super haunted, okay? Hospitals are kind of like airports. There's a lot of comings and goings of a lot of different things. And any place that's like that, like any hallway, airport, or hospital, you'll find very haunted. Either things just get stuck there. I forget what they're called. I was just researching them, but there is a name for them. So anyway, yes, I used to work at White Memorial well over 20 years ago in the pediatric department as a pediatric nurse. I was a charge nurse, and we had this one pediatric resident doctor who would not go sleep in the call room. Okay, so the call room is where the residents go sleep if they're doing a 24-hour shift, if they're on call, so that if we need anything, we call them and they come and help us with the patients. So this one particular physician, he believed in ghosts. He would talk about ghosts all the time. It was part of his, I think he was from Singapore. So he was just super scared of ghosts, and he claimed to see them all the time. And in this one area in the call room, many people had said they had seen this apparition of a woman, and she would sing and she would go down these hallways. Finally, I remember talking to my manager about this, and she said, "Oh, yes, that woman, she used to be the chaplain many years ago. I think she had died like over 10 years ago from this story. And she used to be the chaplain. She had cancer. And that unit where all the residents slept, that was the cancer ward. So many people died on the cancer ward. So this woman had a huge love for White Memorial. She loved that hospital. So it's almost like she decided to stay there. And she haunts the corridors and sings. And some people have actually said that they've heard her sing, which is very fascinating.
Certainly sounds like she was definitely addicted to that place to stick around.
Yeah. I mean, some of these entities, either it's because, and this is what I've been researching lately, they've been there so many times, so it's not really them haunting it, but it's their energy. It's like their essence in a way, because there's like this energy loop happening. And unless that energy loop is really creating problems, people really don't do anything about them.
Would you consider that residual energy, residual hauntings?
I think so. I think so. I'm not exactly sure. Like, I've just learned about them, and it just makes sense. You know, I knew someone who had told me about, so he was living in an old building, and he had this happen to him like every day at a certain time, and it had something to do with his computer. He would see this man just come through his apartment, and he could see him smoking, and he was wearing like coattails and a top hat. And it would happen at a certain hour, and he would come through.
Yeah, that's definitely considered residual energy. If it happens the same time every day, that's considered residual. Yeah.
Right. And he didn't know what was really happening. Like, he didn't understand it at the time. So he said his girlfriend had told him, "Oh yeah, I talked to the man today." You know, he came home from work one day, and he's all like, the girlfriend's all like, "So I talked to this man today, and he told me that, you know, he used to live here and this and that."
So she actually interacted with the spirit.
That's what she said. Yeah. So I guess
she must have been sensitive to a certain degree, I would think, for her to be able to communicate like that.
Right. She was real psychic. Yeah. I mean, that doesn't happen to just anybody, but although more and more people are becoming much more sensitive.
Mm-hmm. Well, everybody has the ability. It just means you have to be open-minded and want to learn. And if you're willing to, anything's possible.
True. Joe, I've taught a few of my friends. I had one of my friends, Gary, his grandfather passed many years ago, and he was having some addiction problems, had some near-death experiences, and he always wanted to make amends with his grandfather because he thought that his grandfather just had bad feelings about him, was not proud of him, right? And so all of a sudden one day his mother started sending him articles from his grandfather, just very randomly. And one of the articles was his lighter. Gary had this lighter framed for his mother, but his mother ends up giving it to him, and he has it sitting on his nightstand. So just jokingly one day we were sitting on the couch, and he was showing me this lighter, and I was like, "Do you want to talk to your grandfather?" And he's like, "Yes." So I sat there and I did the channeling first, and he was coming through me. And so I was explaining to him what I was seeing. And what I was seeing was that he was on like this dock on a lake wearing overalls. And he goes, "Oh, that's our lake house that I grew up at." He goes, "I grew up water skiing on that lake house." I go, "Yeah, I see your grandfather." And he's like waving at me like this. And and so then I passed it on to him, you know, and I gave him the lighter, and I go, "You can talk to him, you know, anytime you want." So he started doing it. And what was really interesting was his mother as he started to have these conversations with his grandfather, his mother started sending him more and more articles from his grandfather. Like, he was in World War II. He had been stationed in France, I think, and he was getting these love letters that he had written to his grandmother. So he had several of them. And one night we had a reading of these love letters. Like, we had played some Chopin. We like lit some candles, and his grandfather just really came, like, he just wanted these letters to be read, you know. And I even wrote a story for my email list of all my fans. And I wrote this story about how we sat around and read these letters, but they were profound. But he even husband was asking for signs, like if something was going wrong in his life. He's like, can you please, like he was fighting with his husband. So he said, can you send me a sign? Because I send me a sign that this is going to be okay. So he sent him a dove. One day there was a dove that was injured in they live up in the desert here. So one of the doves was injured. One of the wings was injured. So his dog, he sees his pit bull just pushing this dove with his nose and kind of trying to save it. So he goes and he picks him up and he brings him in the home and he puts him in a cage. Like they save a lot of wild animals. So it was really interesting. He took it as a sign. So he sat and worked on his marriage more instead of just leaving. And so, which was a good thing.
Absolutely. So it definitely was a sign. I'm for sure about that.
Yeah.
You had mentioned something about a television flipping. What was that?
Television flipping? No.
No? In one of your stories about the hospital or the ghostly stories, I thought there was a television flip.
You know what? That's very interesting. I don't think I mentioned that to you, but I was thinking it. You must have read me television. That's a trip because I was thinking that earlier, but I don't think I ever mentioned it. So what would happen? This is wow, I love it. Don't you love it when this is like a real paranormal show? Start having telepathy. You don't even have to speak, normally. But yes, again, at White Memorial, like, because I used to work night shift, what would happen is that the TVs would flip on and off all the time. They'd be off, and you'd do rounds, and all of a sudden, all the TVs would come on, boom, 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 boom. So that would happen a lot. Another thing that happened when I worked there as well is there was this kid with red hair, not a patient of mine, but who had died there several years ago, and many of the nurses would see him, like, walking the halls. Like he was either wanted to stay there or was just very stuck. Very interesting.
So sad with children because you're so unsure about whether they like it there or they're stuck. And I hate that feeling of the possibility of them being stuck. And I'm always wanting to help them and find out. And a lot of the times they're frightened. They're actually afraid to speak up. So
they're in that in-between space. Nobody has these conversations on where do we go when we die. How does your soul really know where to go? That's why I think it's called death docents or death doulas are so important. Do you know about death doulas?
No, I don't.
So death doulas are kind of like shamans in a way and there's you could take a whole class on it. And what they do is they help someone pass on. They'll sit at the bedside. They'll either kind of like a priest in a way, and they'll help the soul onto the other side. Very much like a psychopomp is what they are. Like the psychopomp, as we know, is like either the Green Reaper or there's the other archetypes of the psychopomp that is helping that person cross that river Styx to get to where they need to go.
Have you ever had anything happen to you in the morgue?
In the morgue, no. I've had a couple of incidences where I had to go to the morgue, and one unfortunately was for a stillborn baby, but nothing happened there. And then another time this was a bad story. I was working postpartum, and a mother had a spontaneous abortion, and forget how many weeks, but they kept the babies in some solution, and she wanted to see them. They were twins, and it was so sad. And I was like, they should not, once they're in solution, it was just, that was the most glorious thing that I had to do. And the nurse made me do it because she said I was the young one and I needed to learn, which to this day, I was just like, yeah, no, that was just not appropriate. I know the mother was crying and wanted to really see these babies, but I would have never have showed anyone the babies like that. It just wasn't appropriate.
I totally agree. I've heard of babies dying stillborn or prematurely and not living, like you just mentioned. And every time I've heard of that and seen a photograph, they allowed the parent or parents to hold the child and take photographs with the child before they take the child away. That's insane that they would do that, what you just said.
It was just, this happened a long time ago, and it was just not anything that I would approve of. It was just very sad.
Why would the babies be in a solution anyway? Were they keeping it for study or something?
I'm not sure. I think maybe they were going to do an autopsy on them to find out why. I don't remember. It was a very long time. Gosh, that must have been...
It seriously doesn't make sense for them to put it in solution if they're going to...
Yeah. I don't know what happened. So it was actually a hospital I was working. I used to do a lot of registry work, like temporary work. And so I happened to be working there, and that's what happens. Unfortunate, but.
Very much so. My goodness. Well, my Lady Ghostbuster team member, Deb Zielinski, is a nurse with the elderly and has experienced many a thing over the years due to her sensitivity to spirit. She adamantly insists she has witnessed death come for patients, as well as a Nosferatu-like figure of death come for not so good people. And you had just mentioned the Grim Reaper. She referred to death coming as the Grim Reaper, and not as frightening looking as you would anticipate death to be. But the Nosferatu-like figure freaks the ward out. She
actually saw this figure. That's very interesting.
Yes. In fact, of both. She's seen the Grim Reaper and she's seen the Nosferatu-like figure. The Grim Reaper, usually it's several days before the patient dies.
That's what I heard.
That this figure shows up, and it'll be in the patient's room, and that's how the nurses will go in to maybe give them medicine or check in on them, whatever, and they'll catch it in the room, and then it'll just disappear. The Nosferatu one is very similar in that respect. They'll catch it off guard when they're going in to see a patient, but it is so damn creepy. When they walked in the room and they spotted it, its head snapped in their direction, and they saw these bright red eyes, and it literally
shrunk down in size, went out the wall.
But the reason why they had gone into the room in that particular instance was the woman patient was screaming at the top of her lungs, "Help me! Help me!" And so these nurses are running to see what the heck is going on with her. And they run into the room and they see this thing hovering over her, and obviously caught it off guard, and it snapped its head, and that whole thing happened. And the patient flipped out saying, "Didn't you see it? Did you see it? It's going to kill me. It's going to kill me." And so these nurses have just seen the scariest thing they've ever seen in their lives, and they're trying to calm her down, but they're also trying to keep themselves calm because they don't know what the heck it was that they saw. Now, Deb, who is sensitive to this sort of thing, knows what it is. Of course, it was frightening nonetheless, but she can handle it. But some of these other nurses don't believe in it, or are not receptive, or have never seen it. And so the next thing you know, one's hysterical crying and she's on her knees praying, and they go into the bathroom to try and calm themselves down. And the other nurse is saying to Deb, "What the heck was that?" And while they're in the room adjacent to this patient's bedroom,
lights flickering,
water's going on off. So can you imagine someone like you or I who's used to sensitivity? We're fine with something like that because we know that this is something that is possible and plausible. But somebody who doesn't believe in it, that's a nurse, and sees this, could you imagine her freaking out? This woman that was working with Deb.
Yeah.
This woman was bad news. She was extremely rich and snobby, and oftentimes she would take her toothbrush and make the nurses scrub the floor with it because that's all they were good for. She was so used to having servants. She was used to having her own way. She had a room in the corner with a window. So she wasn't a very nice person in life. So imagine that's why this Nosferatu-like figure was coming for her as opposed to just the Grim Reaper. And within a few days, I believe it was, the woman did pass.
Oh, wow. That's so fascinating. Goosebumps. I love it. I love that story.
The Grim Reaper, she says, looks like a very tall man with like a trench coat and a top hat.
Yeah.
Not imposing, just what you wouldn't expect.
Yeah, usually what I've heard, what is that woman's name? She just wrote this book. I'm trying to get her on my podcast. She's a very nice woman. She did a Netflix show. I think it's called Surviving Death.
Oh, I've heard of that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's about the near-death experiences and stuff. In it, she also talks about the spirits of deceased loved ones coming back, and sending messages and all of that. But what people in hospice care had reported, it's usually like the loved ones, the dead loved ones coming for them, or a light being coming for them and taking them onto the other side. But these characters, I've never really heard of the dark side coming and stuff. That's very fascinating. In all of these TV shows that I've watched and that I've read, it's always these light beings or the family members coming.
Right. Well, just as you mentioned, nurses are privy to people's last hours, even minutes often. They've spoken to me about patients speaking with deceased loved ones they can only see in the room with them. Some have even spent a last glorious evening with their beloved deceased spouse before passing on themselves. Have you ever experienced anything like that before?
Yeah, I've had a lot of very, very interesting paranormal experiences. Ever since I was a kid, I was super sensitive. Like, I was that kid that cried all the time. I used to have a lot of outer body experiences. So my grandmother, she committed suicide, and on her second suicide attempt, she was successful. Okay. And she was in a very abusive relationship with my grandfather. And I think that how she committed suicide was jumping off of a building in Italy. So my parents are from Bari. And so my grandmother came from a little town called Delphi Caneto. So the buildings there, they're architecturally preserved to where they can't build up on them. So they're only so high. I'm not exactly sure on how tall the structures are, but they're not that tall. On the rooftops, that's where people go and would hang their laundry, to dry. She would go, and I guess because she was, in a psychosis or having deep depression or whatever, so she would just jump. And so the first time she wasn't successful, and then the second time she was. But she was coming through, and I think she first hit my cousin who had a psychotic event, and then she hit my brother who had a psychotic event, and then she hit me. And what I was doing, and at that time when she hit me, I mean, I had already, I love the paranormal. I had been studying it for quite several years. And for some reason, I looked in the mirror one day and I had my glasses on and I go, why do I look like an old woman? And I go, I look like my grandmother. And it was very bizarre. Like, I could see her image in the mirror. And I just kind of brushed it off. And I wasn't really feeling sad or depressed or like killing myself or, and I didn't feel like I was having a psychotic event. I had gone to see a healer and he told me, oh, you have this woman on you. And I think I went to go see someone else and they told me how to get rid of her. And they're like, oh, she's trying to, move on. She's still stuck in this plane and you're the one to kind of move her on. So all it was I just wrote this thing on how it's just you're almost vindicating her soul in a way. And so that she could move on. I burned it, buried it, and I had never seen her since.
You sure she's just not quiet, that she's really not there?
I feel her. I don't feel her. I don't see her. I think she was stuck in a realm. She was like, wherever suicides go, I mean, there's so many different theories about suicides. I feel sometimes they get stuck. Personally, from what I've seen, I had this guy I went out on a date with who actually worked he's a nurse practitioner as well. And he worked for the same group of doctors that I work for. And I'd never met him because he went to go be a Buddhist monk for a year. So he left practice and went to go be a Buddhist monk. And when he came back, we were in the middle of COVID. I met him on a dating app. We'd spent 3 dates together, very platonic. We just would meet at my home or go out to eat. And I got to know him very well. He's a very, very fascinating character. And then he came back to work at one of the offices. And all of a sudden in December, I got a phone call from my office manager and she had told me he had passed away and he was 50 years old. And I was just like, oh my gosh, now he had told me that he was at the end of his journey. He knew he was done. And His home was paid off. They got in a divorce. He'd finally resolved everything there. And he kind of, he went and did this Buddhist monk thing for a year. He went to India. I don't know if you know of that. There's like this festival where they have ashes of dead people, and the monks there, they'll put the ash all over them, and it's all colored ash. So he had gone there and he was like, give me more of that ash. It feels so good. It's so good. And he didn't know it was the ash of dead people.
Oh.
So, not to laugh, but it's a very interesting story. So when we were having these really deep conversations, like we talked for 6 hours, while we were sitting and having these meals, we were just so into conversation about stuff. He was kind of saying like he was done with his life. He was at the end of it. And then all of a sudden they found him dead one day. They found a needle in his arm and he had overdosed. And I tapped into him because I just was like, what? Because he stopped talking to me too. After those meetings, he just stopped talking to me, which I thought was very odd. He wouldn't return my text messages unless I was asking him something professional about work. He'd return my text message, but if it was something social, he would not, which was strange. So I tapped into him and I remember seeing his image and he kept saying, it was time, it was time, it was time. And that's all I remember. He also belonged to, this is very interesting about soul work, is very fascinating. He also belonged to, he was on the board of a female Buddhist monk monastery, I guess you want to call it, Buddhist temple in the desert here. And so they were doing a lot of work for his soul to move on as well and stuff, which I thought was very interesting because I'd kind of seen it on his Facebook site, what they were doing for him. So to really help his soul pass on into a better place. People come in and out for me. I was telling you, I channel artists recently, artists who want stuff done,
Out of the blue, just randomly like that?
And I think I mentioned, I was dating this guy years ago, probably around 2011. His father was a famous photographer. In the 1960s, 70s, his mother was a very famous model. A very iconic model in the 1960s, very mid-century modern model, very much like Twiggy. I met him online and I went to go see him. And when I went to see him at this bar, I could see like a figure, a shadow. So how you see it is a shadow going in and out. That's how I see things. And it was a shadow of a man. But this bar I know is very haunted. It's in a very haunted part of Los Angeles. So I was just like, I don't know what I'm seeing. I don't know what this is. So when I went home, I had Googled who his father was. And I was like, that's the man I saw. So on our next date, I just asked him, I was like, I'm going to ask you a very weird question because these are just questions that come up in my head. And so I asked him, I was like, do you dream of your father? And he said, yes. And I was like, are you arguing with him? What's going on in your dreams? And he goes, yeah, we argue in my dream. Like, how did I know that? So, just very random, right? And so they were arguing because he was getting his art, he was doing this art installation with his father's work. And I guess they were arguing about what was going to go up, how it was supposed to be done. And I told him, I'm getting this vibe or this message from your father that says you need to just listen to him. And he goes, I'm not going to listen to him. And he's like, you tell him, he just doesn't get it. He's like, he wants to do things the old way. He's like, but I'm doing things more modern. I just get it. He needs to just let me do my thing, which was really weird. I was like, I don't know what this is.
And I was in the middle of an argument.
I was very much a novice. I just was like, I had undergone a few past life regressions myself. I don't know. And I think I was starting to undergo hypnotherapy at this point. I'm not exactly sure, but it was really interesting. So on another date, he doesn't even tell me what we're doing. We're going for a walk and we're in West Hollywood, right by the Beverly Center. And he takes me in front of this restaurant and he asked me, do you feel anything here? And I go, I see your father and he's picking up something like sand and he's putting it through his hands to his other hands. And I go, and he has this really like smile on his face, but it's kind of like a narcissistic, evil smile. Like he's not so happy. And he goes like this. He goes, well, this restaurant that we're standing in front of was the last place that my father was alive at. He's like, he died after his 83rd birthday, right? And he goes, and yeah, I guess he's probably mad that I cremated him because he wanted to be buried because he's Catholic.
Oh, boy.
Right?
Horrible. Why wouldn't you respect your parents' wishes? Why would you go and do something that they didn't want?
From the dead. Hello. Right?
Yeah.
He was just
Oh, my goodness.
He was mad in so many ways, this poor man. And I guess he had a beautiful home in the Hollywood Hills, and the person that was above him in the mountains, I think, was either an Apple person or a tech person in their house. All this mud had come into their home. And he said that his father was sick. I think his father had cancer and was like outside. This older sick man was shoveling off all this dirt. And he was so upset. Like he just did not pass in a peaceful way, unfortunately. So there was all this chaos going on at the time. But yeah, so I had told this guy, I was like, you know what? I don't know what this is. And I gave him the name of a shaman that I was seeing that had done my past life regressions. I was like, go talk to her. She can help you. And then he had, I had talked to him for several months. One day he started texting me, and then I just stopped talking to him because I was like I said, at that time, I really didn't know until I started to study more and practice more.
He couldn't have been a very nice person if he did that to his father anyway. So.
Right. True. I think you're right. At least says a lot about a person. So, but yeah, very fascinating.
Getting back to the nurses and family members having mentioned to me in my interviews that they see an angelic glow emanate from their dying loved ones. And sometimes they even hear the sound of beautiful music at the moment of their loved one's death. Have you ever heard anything like that before?
I've never, because I work in pediatrics mostly, I haven't been at the bedside of too many deaths. But when I worked at Children's Hospital, you can feel energy, which is why I no longer work in hospitals, because I felt like I was suffocating. And that's probably why so many people get burnt out and are having problems, and they just don't realize it. I really believe hospitals need to be cleared out. I had a friend who would do it. She would claim to go and clear the hospitals out, but I would be like, yeah, you clear them out, then they just get all muddled up again, I guess you could say. So it's something either needs to be done, and a lot of hospitals are so cavernous. But in the old hospital at Children's Hospital, it was very, very haunted, that whole area, and you could feel it. And I was teaching one day, I was teaching a group of students, and I had to take them into the intensive care. And outside of the intensive care, there was this wall, and they had these pictures of these children who had died. I used to call it the wall of death. And it just did not make me feel good going into that intensive care. Like I almost couldn't even go in there. And so I reported it. And that was all the doing of the manager at the time of that unit, that he decided to do these with these plaques of these children. And I don't know if the parents had donated those plaques or what. I go, you know what? If I had a child in here, it would not make me feel good.
Exactly.
I would call it the wall of death. So I even wrote the CEO. I go, I think we need to get rid of the wall of death. Well, they built a whole new hospital, and that no longer, they don't have that, thank God. And I don't know if that wall is still there in the old hospital, because I know they changed that unit into like office space. Mm-hmm. But people complain about hauntings there all the time, like they see apparitions. I mean, I didn't like to work there. The last place that I worked there, when I worked there, I worked in radiology. And sometimes they would leave me there alone. Like I was the last nurse practitioner to go, and I'd stay until about 6 or 7 o'clock sometimes, and nobody would be there. It was just me. And it was like the creepiest feeling ever, because I would just start things move. And I'd be like, can't be here,
I'll bet.
Yeah. But that's very interesting about the music. I hadn't heard that from people, and I've had some hospice nurse friends, but I've never heard about the music, though.
I wanted to share this little story with you. It's really short, but it's really sweet. And ironically, the woman in the story's name is Eleanor. The story was submitted to me by a woman named Maria Zimmerly, and it's about a woman in a hospital named Eleanor. "Where are my husband and sons, those rascals?" she asked each morning. "You'll see them at breakfast," Maria consoled her. "I promise they'll be done with their fishing by then." Eleanor's sons visited her regularly and tried to take her out to church, but she often failed to recognize them, expecting to see them in their youth. On a sharper morning, Eleanor informed Maria after breakfast that her dead husband visited. "Do you think I'm crazy?" she asked. "I'm glad you had a good time," Maria replied. "Your sons are coming on Tuesday. You can have breakfast with them." "No," Eleanor responded, "I can't. My husband's taking me to Perkins, my favorite breakfast spot." "Oh, okay," Maria said. "It's nice you both have a breakfast date." "Oh, honey," Eleanor told her, finally grabbing Maria's hand. "I don't think you understand what I mean. I'll be with my husband on Tuesday. I'll be leaving this body to go with him."
Oh, wow.
Maria hesitated, unsure of what to say. "Do you mean you're dying on Tuesday?" Eleanor nodded, yes. "Well," Maria started, finally understanding. "Spirits touch everyone in different ways. My grandparents died a month apart from one another. Granny went first. Grandpa told me she appeared and told him she'd be coming back for him, and she did. I think you've been blessed, and I believe you." Eleanor smiled. "If you're ready to go," Maria said, "it's okay." Eleanor passed early Tuesday morning.
Wow, I love it. Love this story.
Right?
I love it. I've had people tell me when they were going to pass or how they were going to pass. And I remember I was in Italy. It probably was in 2009 or before that. No, it was 2002. And my cousin's grandmother, I remember she was washing my underwear, my thong underwear. And I told my cousin, I kind of feel uncomfortable with her washing my underwear. And she's like, "Well, just let her do it. She's old. She has nothing to do other than bug us." And she was a very sweet lady. And she'd sit there and tell me stories and when she was young and all of this. And her granddaughters would be like, "Stop bothering her." They're like, "If Granny bothers you, just let us know." She just has a tendency of talking and talking. But she sat down and she told me how she was going to die. And she said, "When I die," I think she almost turned 100. She goes, "When I die, I don't want people to be sad." She goes, "I want to die and it's going to be a party. Like, I want everybody to be happy and dancing and laughing. And there's going to be a party when I die." Well, she died, I think it was her 99th birthday or her 100th birthday. Right before the cake came out, she had a stroke and she died right then and there in front of everyone.
Wow.
Yep. That was a trip.
There was a party.
And when there was a party, and when her daughter had told me, I just was dying. I was like, she told me she was going to die that way. And I remember telling my dad's just like a freak. He doesn't believe in anything. Like, he's getting more believable, like he just does. My mother is the more intuitive one, right? My father is intuitive in his own way. My dad was like, "You're so full of it. Don't talk like." He's like, "I can't." I go, "I swear to God, she told me she was going to die that way." And her daughter was like, "Well, she could have waited for the cake." So she could at least wait for the cake, but she left right before the cake, which was really cool. And I think she's actually back because her granddaughter had a daughter. I think she's going to be about 2 years old. But I swear to God, I look at this kid and her mannerisms and the way I go, "I swear that's Maria."
It very well could be. It very well could be. She came back sooner than later. She wanted to be back in that family.
Yeah. No, she really loved that family, of course. Yes.
I've heard that people insist that death comes in cycles of 3. And I've tried the theory out over and over again, and I can't argue with them. Have you ever had that happen before? That when you hear, I know my mom used to say it all the time, "Oh my goodness, there's one, now you have to wait for 2 more. And we literally would wait for those 2 more and it would happen. And if it's a family member or in the family, let's say, you're going to get 3 in the family. Or if it's an acquaintance or a friend, it's going to be 3 acquaintances or friends. Or if it's just 3 deaths randomly or 3 celebrities, it always happens. Haven't you noticed that?
Yeah, I've noticed that. And of course, superstitious Italians, the same thing. It happens in 3s. But it also in studying the subconscious mind. So we have something called the law of 3s, like in writing. You have the law of 3s, like in joke writing, like in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. It's like a trilogy of things, and it makes the story so much better. So if you're saying it happens in 3s, what's happening in your subconscious is going to look for that pattern now. You see what I'm saying? Because it's so used to seeing that. So that's what it could very well be. I mean, yeah, maybe sometimes it happens, but then I've had people now with COVID, so many people have been passing. And I really haven't looked for those patterns because I've kind of forgotten that. Like, I think the people that have been dying now, like I haven't had so many people very, very close to me die. It's always been very distant people, or these people may have passed when I just wasn't born yet. Like a lot of my grandparents passed when I wasn't born, or I just was disconnected from them and not speaking. My family wasn't speaking to them. So this time I know this one guy, I had gone to his wedding when I was in Italy in 2002. Like I had spent almost 2 months there in 2002. And it was sad. He died very young. I think he was about 50, the same. And when did he die? I remember my father calling me. He's like, I saw on Facebook this guy died. Remember, we went to his wedding. He's like, he goes, the guy FaceTimes me like all the time. He would FaceTime my father all the time. And he goes, I can't believe he's dead. How did he die? Can you find out? And I was like, what? And I remember he died. But then I was just like, oh, okay, he died. And I just kind of I remember I put his picture on my fridge and kind of just memorialized him and memorized it. Just paid homage to him because he was a very, very sweet man, a very good person. And he left behind a wife and 2 children, teenagers, which was very sad. But that thought of it happens in 3s didn't come into my subconscious. It hasn't. So I think I don't look for that anymore. So I think that if you look for it, it kind of happens.
I'll have to remember that.
Yeah. But before I used to do the same thing. It happens 3s and you see the 3s, but because I don't focus on that anymore, maybe now when someone passes, they're very close to me. Like I told you, the guy that I had gone on dates with who had passed. So I just saw him as a singular person. Like I wasn't looking for others to kind of pass on. And then this guy, so I kind of just paid homage to them in my own way. And because they're so close to my age, I'm 48. So
and I want to think about that.
Mortality. So I have a different mindset with that. But when someone's older, you're and you kind of really don't care about them. You're like, oh yeah, it happens in 3s. So
I mean, I know people are living longer now, but you do reach a certain age and you think, oh my goodness, how much longer do I have? Do I have 20 years left? You do think about it for sure.
Well, yeah, and it helps you to really appreciate your life a little bit more instead of always working or always doing the same mundane things, and just kind of enjoying things in a different way that you normally would. So
yeah. Well, here's something else I've also heard. Hospital staff have been known to refer to the hours of 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. as the bewitching hour.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's when the veils are so thin. And that's when Buddhist monks meditate. I mean, I was dating a guy and he would meditate from those hours from 3 to 5. And that's when he would do his astral traveling because he's also an artist. He's a painter. And that's when he would paint a lot of his stuff. But because the veils are so thin, and some of the stuff he would paint was just pretty wild. So, but yeah, and we used to say that on night shift, that's the time when things would happen. And like I said, I didn't work night shift too long, just a few years. And again, I was very young and I wasn't really paying attention and looking for those things. Had I done it now, I really would. Like I was working at a migrant shelter that was on an Indian reserve. And the stuff that was going on there and the energy was intense. It was really making people lose their shit. So,
Real?
Oh yeah, you could just just the energies or whatever was still there was just triggering people massively, to where even myself, I was getting really I was like, I gotta leave, Like I said, I'm really sensitive, and if I have to really understand what's going on. But as I started walking into this place and there was no one around, I could feel it. I was like, whoa, it just almost like hit me. And someone goes, oh yeah, this is an Indian reservation, which I had never known. I knew about this place in Los Angeles for many years. I never knew it was an Indian reservation. So it was very interesting. Yeah. Did you want to know about children and how children are so sensitive in
fact, I was just going to discuss that with you, that you had mentioned as a pediatric nurse practitioner, you've had children tell you about being able to see dead people. It sounds way too familiar with the 1999 movie Sixth Sense, where the main character child says the same thing. You mentioned they suffer from psychological and health issues. Please do tell.
Right. Children are really sensitive, and I think that I've made it my life's work to work with children because I was such a sensitive kid, and I felt that my parents were not paying attention to me. So, and I've been told by many psychics, intuitives, whatever, like, this is the work that you're supposed to be doing. You're meant to do this work. And I'm kind of there as this guide for these kids and to help them out. So usually from the ages of 0 to 7, the subconscious mind of a child is just very, very open. And sometimes if they've had a past life, they'll bring that past life back and they'll have memories of this past life. And kids can see spirits and they can see entities and they can see things. Not all children, certain ones. And it depends on their parents as well, if their parents are listening to them. Kids are very, very psychic. Lately in clinic, I've had some of my patients reading my mind. So like one day, and it happens when I have to be in that space. So I have to be in a very clear space. I'm meditating all the time. I'm just very carefree. I don't have a lot of stress going on. And that is when it happens. And I'm kind of in this zone. And maybe I had been channeling or whatever when I come into clinic. Like one day I had this family come in and there was about 4 or 5 kids and they all came in together and I hadn't seen them in a couple of years. And I remember seeing one of the brothers and he was so happy to see me, like he had this big smile. And I was like, I remember you. And he goes, I remember you too, and I hadn't seen him in 2 years. And I think he was 2 when I saw him. And now he's about 4 or 5. Right. And I'm here listening to I forgot his name, right. Cause he wasn't coming to be seen. His sister was. So I was doing a physical on his sister. So I'm listening to her heart. And as I'm listening to her heart with my stethoscope, I'm looking at the kid and I'm like, what was that kid's name again? Like I was thinking this in my head. And his sister goes, Frankie. And I was just dying. I was like, oh my God, that's so funny. I've had kids come in and sometimes parents think that their children are possessed. And so I listen to them, but not every child is possessed. So they could be having behavioral issues or could be stuff going on in the home. Parents can possess their children, okay, with thought forms, stuff that's going on. One day I had, I think, a 6-year-old and the mom come in and the mom was wearing some horror movie t-shirt. So there's a sign for me right there so, of what's going on in this household. And she kept saying that this kid was possessed and she did have some behavioral issues and there were other older children in the home and there was a lot going on. And all of a sudden, as I'm examining her, she goes, Pennywise is under there, like under the exam table. And I go, Pennywise? I go, how do you know who Pennywise is? And the mom says, she goes, we watch horror movies.
How old was the child?
6.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, I remember watching The Exorcist as a kid, and I was just forever scarred. I mean, it was just terrible.
Yeah, I'm sure you weren't 6 years old, though.
Right. And so these parents they're not even conscious of what's going on. around them, that these things can really affect these children. I had another child that I was texting you about that had come in. He was about 8 or 9 years old, and he was having various issues. He was wetting the bed. He was pooping his pants, pool, which is called inquaparesis, and inuresis when you're wetting your bed. His mother was just at her wit's end with him, and there was a new baby in the family, and there was a brother that was younger than him. So he was the oldest. So of course, the dynamics where he's not being really tended to, probably because he's the oldest. That I asked him why he was doing this, and mother had said he's not going to the bathroom at night. And so I asked him why, and I interviewed him. He wanted me to talk to him by himself with nobody there. And so I did. And he started telling me these very, very detailed stories of when he had gotten up out of bed. They'd moved to a new home, okay? And he was walking down the hallway, and the hallway was dark. And he said he saw this bright light, and it came through him. So it was kind of like in Ghostbusters. And it went through him, and he could feel this cold sensation, and he just didn't feel good. It wasn't a good feeling for him, and he got so freaked out, he said, that at night he no longer went to the bathroom, so he would wet his bed. And another problem was his mother didn't believe him. So that's the big one. So children are always looking to their parents for support, and they're looking for their parents to defend them and to protect them, correct? And that's a very simple thing that parents have to do, is listen to them, acknowledge to their child that they're being heard, and then show them that you're going to do something about it and defend them. So I told the mother, she was Hispanic, Mexican, and I had told her, I go, all you have to do is very simple, like put a nightlight in the hallway and throw some holy water and just say a few prayers. And I empowered the kid that his mom was going to have his back, and she was going to take care of whatever was there, and that he could go to the bathroom. And so I don't know whatever happened with that case. I never saw that patient again because I work temporarily in these clinics sometimes, and sometimes the patients don't come back when you tell them to. So if everything's okay.
What a shame.
Yeah, I really wanted to know what happened with him. But then, of course, it's also bowel and bladder training with them. And so I gave them other techniques to do other than that as well. But yeah, another time, it's a quick story where the mother just started connecting with me. This is when I worked at Children's Hospital, and the little girl was going in for surgery. And I think she was like 3 or 4 years old. And she kept telling her mother that she kept playing with this imaginary baby. And she would call it Matthew, I think. And so the mom said, she goes, I need to tell you something. She just thought this was really weird because the little girl would be so detailed about this baby. And sometimes she would say, ow, Matthew's hurting me. He's pulling my hair. So she said it was getting a little bit too intense, because at first she just thought it was an imaginary friend. And so then she said, I asked her this weird question. And again, I was very novice at the time when I started doing this. And I said, were you pregnant before her? And she says, yes. And she said that she was pregnant with a boy and she miscarried. And she was going to name that boy Matthew.
And that never triggered with her? It never dawned on her?
She just didn't want it. She did, but I don't think anybody was listening to her.
I meant the mother who
Right. Nobody was listening to. She just kind of wasn't. You know what I mean? It's like, really?
Seriously.
But some people, you don't believe in it. What are you going to do?
Come on. That's seriously. That's like, really, that's going to make you believe. You're going to say, I can't believe it, but this is happening and it's real. Seriously.
Right.
Well, it takes hitting over the head with something for the person to actually wake up and smell the coffee.
Right. And so, again, I had given her the name confidentially of someone who could help her potentially with this. And she said there were so many things going on at the home. And sometimes the little girl would wake her up and she'd be like, Matthew wants, and she said it just was getting really creepy. And I go, yeah, there's definitely some type of entity there. And I would take some of these stories to the groups that I was going to, because I would meet with other people who were also studying the paranormal, and they would say it could it could very well be that spirit form that was trying to come through and that is kind of jealous that this child is now born, and it kind of is just manipulating her and just antagonizing her. But it also could be just a malevolent other spirit that just came into being. Like, very true. But again, I never spoke to those people again. So unfortunately.
Oh my goodness. It's like a series that they cut off on TV and they don't tell you what happens.
Right? I'm like, whatever happened to those stories? I did have a friend, though, that her daughter, this is very interesting because I started to do a lot of past life stuff and it was very intuitive. So her daughter another nurse practitioner friend, and her daughter was having a lot of learning disability problems. She was dyslexic and had come in with a lot of stuff, and she was having trouble and she had to change schools. My friend just was fighting the school board with stuff and had to get her trained. It was just a lot of drama. So I go, do you want me to tap in and look into why this is happening? Like, why she came in with this? She's like, yeah. And so all of a sudden I got this download, and it was wild. Back in the 1600s or 1700s or something, I'd seen this kid. She was wearing this red crimson cloak, and the kid has a name that goes with the color red, which is very interesting, right? And I could see all these other people with these different color cloaks, like greens or whatever. And so they were working on this book called The Great Book. So she was part of contributing to this book. So she had come into this lifetime because she had all these skills in that lifetime. So now in this lifetime, she had all these disabilities with reading and language, but she chose her mom because she knew her mom would be fighting for her and stuff. And because her mom could say, I know my kid is a smart kid. She's like, but the problem was she was in private school, but in public school, she was getting much more support. She didn't want her to be in like special ed, but she really, really worked hard for this kid. And I go, yeah, that's right. And it just gave her so much more peace. And then she did believe in this. And then the kid, when she was little, she would see, they lived in a part of Maryland that was very haunted. So like there were a lot of, she'd take pictures of homes that she was going to buy. She's like, do you think this one's haunted? I was like, oh yeah, that one just looks, But the kid, she would see entities when they would walk down the street, and she'd be like, Mommy, there's a lady there. No. So
very sensitive.
Really yeah, kids are wild. I love them because, and the most important thing for a parent, it's very simple, is just listen to their stories and just acknowledge what they're going through. And
you mentioned that you do house clearings, and for the listening audience, house clearings are if someone is asked to come in and clean the house of paranormal activity. So my paranormal team and I did an investigation in Phillipsburg, New Jersey. The homeowner once lived in the home with her own family and experienced activity. Even her youngest child was afraid to go in the basement because the man told him he would hit him if he did.
Gosh.
Eventually, she moved her family out, and the home was used as a rental income. She had my team come in to see if we could do something about the ghost residing there because she had a couple that was moving in with their 5-year-old daughter, and she didn't want anyone to get hurt. While we were there, both my mediums experienced an attempt by the spirit to push them down the stairs. One of the mediums saw in her mind's eye a man being beaten down in the basement. We knew we couldn't allow the spirit to stay. We advised a house cleaning and brought in my team member Jackie Hingley to do just that. She cleared the house and then sealed it shut. The woman said her renters were happy. They never mentioned any activity or being frightened by anything. The houses in that neighborhood were tract houses, and they all looked alike. I often wonder if the spirit found its way into another one of the houses. I'd be curious to hear from other neighborhood residents about any suspect activity since then.
That's interesting. I know, because sometimes either they just move on, or sometimes they move on to something else or latch on to someone else, especially, I'm sure that the way people get spirit attachments is if they have holes in their aura, if they're drinking a lot, using drugs, going through depression and stuff, these spirit entities, these energy particles, whatever you want to call them, they'll latch on to you because either they A, still want to live, B, don't know they're dead, or just want that experience again, which I'll tell you about my house clearing story, and then I'll tell you about how a friend of mine decided to conjure a demon.
No.
I have stories for days. My good friends call me Bruja. They used to call me Bruja. I used to be a part of, one of my friends was an editor for a publishing house. And I had these other groups of friends that were writers, and we were, we all met in writing courses that we would take in Los Angeles and writing retreats. And we'd all hang out and drink as writers do and tell stories, and got very close with these two guys. And we would hang out, we would have slumber parties. I would go into my friend's house that was the editor. He lived in this very old apartment building, very beautiful 1920s. And I would go into his room because the bathroom was close there. It was like, you know what? I see something in your room. There's something in there, and I don't know what it is, and you need to get rid of it. And so there were boxes by the window, and he goes, do you think that they're the love letters? So he starts reading these old love letters and stuff that these women had written him. And I was like, I don't know, maybe that's bad energy. So then I went there again another day, and I told him the same thing. I go, it's right by your window. I don't know what it is. So then one day we were at a book reading, and he tells me, he's like, Bruja, he goes, I swear you have to come to my house and clear out my house. He goes, I feel what you're talking about. I was like, you better not be bullshitting me, because I take what I do very seriously. Like, you don't mess with my powers. And he goes, no, I'm serious. He's like, I can't sleep and I don't know what it is. You're right. It's something at that area. He's like, I cleared out the boxes. I redecorated a little bit. There's still something there. I went in and took some of my tools. We went to brunch first to kind of talk to me a little bit so I could kind of feel out the energy a little bit more. So I went in there, and it was the funniest thing ever. I mean, a lot of the things I do are very comical, They're not very scary. It's almost like I love to watch Scooby-Doo. So it's almost like a Scooby-Doo episode, There's a lot of comedy involved. So I'm walking around his room, and he's right in back of me, like creeping over me. And it was like, there it is. And he starts screaming. He just starts freaking out, right? And so what it was, this is very interesting. So right across from his window, he had a bookcase in his bedroom. And I like to call it, again, the Bookcase of Death, because he had a picture of his dead mother. He had the crucifix that was on the coffin of his grandmother, and he had the ashes of his dead dog. Okay? There's still matter and energy. They're atoms, right? So it's energy. So right across from the window, that's where we were feeling that energy from. So I went there, and around the window, it was weird. On the floor, it looked like there were two footsteps, two shoes. They had these hardwood old floors. So it looked like there were shoes there. It was really weird. So what I felt was it was a fragment, and I had this fragment just go on. And I said a prayer, moved it on to the light, cleared it out. We went ahead and cleared the area with ammonia, put some flowers there. But I also had him disperse the wall of death there, and I had him move the mother's picture somewhere else. I tried to get him to get rid of the ashes, and then the crucifix, I just had him put it in a drawer somewhere or in another part of the room that it's not in his bedroom, okay? And so my group that I was a part of at the time, they had told me it could have been the energy for the ashes that was causing it. But I did feel like a fragment. And I remember my friend was there, and he said, he goes, it's not like a ghost, right? It feels like it's a piece. I go, yeah, it's like a fragmented soul. It's like just a piece of a soul. It's like an energy form, but it wasn't really like an apparition or anything. So things had gotten better for him after that. And then like about a year later, because he kept the ashes of the dog, he said that someone was in the home, like he had left. So the person was staying in his home for about a month without him there. there, and they said that they could feel something following, like a dog or an animal following them around the house, and that animal didn't want them to be there. And I go, so he blamed me, and I was like, well, you left the ashes there. The dog, the dog knows you if it's still there. I always tell people, don't keep ash in their home. Anybody, just really let it go, because it is energy in a form and stuff. So I actually was going to go do a clearing today because my friend had some witches who were doing, this is a very true story. He sent me pictures. I just was mortified. They were doing ritual in his Airbnb.
Rituals in his Airbnb.
They left all this ash, and they had taken down his smog detectors, and they left this big thing of ash, and there was ash everywhere. Very bizarre, very, very bizarre. And I was like, as soon as he showed me that, at first I was like, what? And I was like, oh my God, they were doing ritual. So he did a deep cleaning it out with ammonium. He knows what to do to clear out. I've taught him before, and I just was like, I cannot believe that. That is just so sad that someone would do that.
Unbelievable. Disrespectful of people's property. Jeez.
Right. Well, all of that just go, because I told him, as you clean, just throw it all back to them. It's all going to come back to them. So, I mean, people.
Right. That was good, yeah.
And anybody there who are out here, your listeners who want to be careful for when you do those rituals, because it's going to just come back to you. So,
I didn't think about that. That's so true. And what was this crazy friend that wanted to summon up a demon?
Oh, yes. I had a friend. She was a chiropractor, and she was just getting into a lot of witchcraft and a lot of
that sounds like
stuff. Yeah, like the Golden Dawn. Do you know about the Golden Dawn? That's like Aleister Crowley's group, and Aleister Crowley he's the most, the darkest magician, the most popular, the most famous. So she had joined a group like that, and I was learning a lot of stuff at the time. And she had a friend who was a medium, and she channels and stuff. And she had been going to hanging out with this woman a lot. She kept saying, oh, you should meet my friend. I was like, oh, I would love to, but we never connected. So one day we're having dinner, and I just see this shadow on my friend, my chiropractor friend, like going in and out. And I'm like, do you have something on you? Did you do something? I just see something like a man on you. And she goes, oh, yes, I channeled a demon, just like that. These stories are true. This is my life. This is my reality. I feel like I'm in this is my live screenplay. And I was like, what are you talking about? You channeled a demon. She's like, I go, well, what does he want for you? I go, you cannot just invite these things in, because it's like they don't leave, and then they cause drama in your home. She's like, well, he's helping me get more business for my chiropractic practice. And I was like, you couldn't do marketing for that? I go, well, what does he want?
What he's going to want in repayment, dude?
Like, what does he want in return? She goes, well, all he wants is really just to feel again. He wants to, breathe again and feel life again and to live. And I was just like, girl, you're crazy. So I called her friend. I went on her channeling friend's website, and I told her, I was like, I need to meet with you. So we ended up having, I told her what the problem was first. So she went to meet with our mutual friend first, right? And then she wanted to talk to me about what I saw and what happened, because she was very mad at this
person for doing that.
Well, for doing that, because she had been apprenticing her. Kind of, she was hanging out with her, and she just couldn't believe she was doing this. So she sat down with me, and I told her the story, and she goes, it's interesting because I told her the same thing that you did. Like, I asked her, do you have something on you? And she denied me. And she goes, but why do you think she said yes to you? And I go, I don't know. And she goes, do you think maybe she's competitive with you? And I go, yeah, probably, because she always wanted to know more. And she was doing everything that she could, and working with it. Like I said, I've been studying this stuff for a very long time in pieces, but it's not for the faint of heart. Got to be very careful, because when you're playing with stuff, you just don't invite whoever into your being. You have to really know and understand what you're doing. So she ended up, she goes, I asked her about 3 times, and she kept denying it. And it was almost like she was a child. I go, well, it was probably her child self that was like she did something bad and she was supposed to. And she said that she spoke to the demon and she asked this entity, like, you need to leave. And he goes, I was asked to be here and I won't leave. And she said, well, this thing that's on you said that you invited it in and it won't leave now, so you need to let it go. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she goes, well, you have something on you. It's not going to leave until you tell it to leave. And so she had to really coax her. And she said it was pretty intense. And after that, she told me she doesn't speak to her anymore. I go, I don't speak to her either, just because you don't want people like just conjuring demons around.
Like that, absolutely not. Oh my. Ersilia, why don't you go ahead and tell the listening audience how they can find your podcast and other information about you?
Sure. My podcast is called Nurses and Hypochondriacs, and it's anywhere where podcasts can be listened to, on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else. I also have a blog on Rogue Nurse Media. I do teach storytelling, and also I teach about the subconscious mind. So anybody can get in contact with me at Ersilia Pompilio 5 at hotmail.com or nursesandhypochondriacs@gmail.com if you'd like to take any of my classes through the Well-Written Nurse. And I also have a blog called Notoriously Single Girl, which is a very fun blog that I write about food, fashion, fun, and dating, and sometimes some paranormal stuff.
You're a busy lady, busy gal.
Yep.
Thrilled to have made a connection with you, and I'm thanking you so much for joining today on my program. I found the discussions very interesting and spooky, to say the least.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eleanor.
You're very welcome. I hope you'll come back again.
Yeah, definitely.
To you, my ghostly listeners, you can follow me on my website, authoreleanorwagner.com, where there are links to my books and video updates and photographs from all of my investigations.